Hello, Mech fans. This is Duncan Fisher. Hold on firmly to your mana potions, fireballs, and familiars, because you are tuning in to your regularly scheduled episode of the First Circuit Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the First Circuit Podcast, episode number 146. Your hosts today include Byter,
Blarg,
myself, Ian, and we've got two special guests today. Say hi to the audience, BearClaw.
Hello.
And Nevid A1.
Hello, everyone.
So, as for topics today, as you can guess from the fact that we have guests, we're gonna talk about something non-regular. Today we're gonna focus on the Cauldron group from Mechwarrior Online, who are basically in charge of redesigning Mechwarrior Online balance. Is that then kind of accurate? Sorta.
They're the ones that are being outsourced to right now by Darren.
Kind of, sort of, half and half.
Yeah.
Well,
we
what
give
spin
them
you would put
ideas
on it?
and they execute it. That's how that works.
All right. So first off, who are you guys, and how might people know you? Let's maybe start with BearClaw.
I don't know. I've been here for a while. I'm a Twitch streamer. Well, I used to be a regular Twitch streamer, and then I kind of got lazy. And I got just tired of seeing the game in the way it was, so I slowed down on the streaming, and I started picking up things in the Cauldron. I was just like, yeah, let's wait until the game is in a better state to start streaming again. So that's what I'm kind of doing, just sitting around waiting for Cauldron patches to get in.
Right. And Navid, who are you, and how might people know your name?
Well, I mean, just like any other player, one of like BattleTech Mechwarrior fans, kind of like fascinated by the game. Started playing this game like closed beta. It was summer of 2012, and then later on got more into like competition and league play, and basically like mm, given feedback on Micro Online, like writing, I don't know, pieces, and then after I realized that hey, there's this effort going on, I was like, sure, uh, we'll jump on, and then basically try to see if we can improve the game, or if they're open to ideas, then let's put something forward and kind of like try to improve things. So yeah, that's me. Yeah, nothing special. Yeah.
You said you were a BattleTech Mechwarrior fan first and foremost. How did you get involved with the BattleTech franchise?
Me? Okay. So I remember, I mean, when I was like I think 14, we bought a PC. It was probably like 1999, and I started with MechWarrior 3, and it's like, damn, this thing is amazing. Like it was really amazing, and then it was like, oh, there's this whole franchise around these things, like these things that these characters are saying have a meaning, and then got into like reading up on the lore, like what what are the factions, like what are the mm, conflicts are about, and then it became more interesting, and I started like playing like other games in the franchise. I think MechWarrior 4. I think I got like MechWarrior 2 and played that a little bit as well. And then it was uh, the great silence after MechWarrior 4. There was nothing, and then yeah, it was basically like we playing in LAN parties, MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries, and then uh, later on MechWarrior Online, and now here we are.
Very cool. And BearClaw, how did you get involved with the franchise?
For me, it was, gosh, I started, I think, 2004 or 5 with Mech Assault. That was my first introduction to MechWarrior BattleTech, and it was exciting, right? As a kid, I was like, oh man, there's giant robots. I get to blow things up. That's cool. And, as I got older, then Mech Assault 2 came out, and I was just like, man, I wonder if there's more to this. So I started Googling and found out there was this entire franchise just hiding in the background that I had no idea about. That's when I started to get into computers, was to try and play MechWarrior 4, Mech Commander. Yeah, it was exciting, but yeah, in the order it went from Mech Assault 1 to 2 to MechWarrior 4, then I started to discover the older games like MechWarrior 3, MechWarrior 2, and Mech Commander. It was really interesting. But yeah, MechWarrior Online, I think I really started playing at, I'm pretty sure, I think it was the Kit Fox came out for C-Bills after the Wave 1 invasion. I remember running around with a Gauss rifle and two ER small lasers. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, cool. It's kind of interesting to hear how people get involved with the franchise. Like your story, mine is similar to yours. Just random game you stumble across, and then like, this is cool. I wonder if there's more. And yeah,
Yeah, it always starts with that.
I'm just really hoping MechWarrior 5 can have the same effect on the next generation. Is it weird to say the next generation? Aren't we still the young generation? Is there a next generation? Oh boy, getting older.
Yeah, it's weird to think about it. It's like, yeah, there's a whole new generation after us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're no longer the young people. Oh no.
You guys are all old and wrinkly
Oh,
and
no.
balding.
Yeah, look at my hair. My hairline just receding. Anyway, let's get started on the whole Cauldron thing. Yeah, we tried to make a quick summary of what the Cauldron is. Can you guys maybe try to summarize it in one or two sentences more coherent than I attempted earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could summarize it. It's basically a group of individuals that have spent a large amount of time playing MWO, and now we're trying to make the game, I guess, fun again after who decided to nerf everything and destroy half the population. We're trying to basically replant the garden, and yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, he who shall not be named. Okay. Going strong with those references today. So, what exactly is it you actually do?
Well,
So, I mean, go ahead there.
yeah, in the Cauldron, I'm sort of the hype guy. Like I opened the Discord, I started the movement, the whole Cauldron Gulag thing. And then I sort of sat back and let the people that wanted to work do their thing. I'm not a very micromanaging person. I'm a very hands-off person, and personally, I'm kind of lazy. So, you know, I like to talk about things. I like to see the people's reactions to what we're doing. And whenever there's a meeting or I need to put input, I'm always there. But yeah, I like to sort of roll things off of a hill and watch it go down the hill, and that's basically it.
Yes, I see BearClaw usually at that, like similar to that meme, standing in the corner looking like, let them fight. And
Yeah,
then
that's me.
yeah. Yeah, that the and he enjoys it. But no, I mean it's like he's like downplaying himself. It's like there are discussions and like he is involved, but yeah, I mean there collects like TLDRs after meetings and kind of like tries to um, kind of like shape the big picture. Like this is the path that we have taken so far, and how we approached it, how we solved it, did we solve it or not at all? Yeah, that. But yeah, I mean, as Bear said, it's a group of people, not necessarily like old, like comp level players. We also have like more casual players and players that didn't necessarily like started playing since those old times, and they have an input. and they can basically like share their experiences. For example, it's like we have people that they're saying it, hey, when I started playing this game, or when I'm playing this game, this is what I'm noticing. That's a problem. Uh, mm, that and they themselves have kind of like connections in different like discords and communities, and are like, oh, hey, this is being brought up a lot here and there. It might be a place of concern. So um the idea for the Cauldron is to have a group that has reach and kind of like mm, and a group that is familiar with all types of players in NWO, so we can have like a realistic connection to what's actually going on, and not just like changing things on a whim. Yeah, I mean these are usually the things, and of course regarding what we do, it's not like, okay, so there is this thing in the game, let's change it. We always, as Bear said, like looking at things that make the game fun. Like what are the main problems that we can identify, and then for now focusing on those. Like, hey, the so-called meta have been stagnant for a long time now, for a couple years. So why is that? Is there a reason behind it? And then investigating it further, like, hey, because like these sort of weapon systems have been nerfed over the years. Like, there's no point like taking these instead of that. And also looking at mechs, that okay, so why some mechs are considered powerful, why some mechs are not, what's the reason behind that? For example, okay, so why do you take this mech? Why aren't you taking that mech? Uh, like getting to the root of those problems, and then trying to put proposals up for voting, and then presenting it to PGI. I mean, some of the stuff that uh, we even like want to see don't really necessarily like relate to mechs or weapons, kind of like mechanics, which are also on the board. And PGI is like going over them, see if they're to implement them. But yeah, I mean that's uh, say in a nutshell. It's a big nut, big nutshell, but yeah, um, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
big nutshell. Go ahead, Byter.
Yes, you talk about, of course, yeah, you've got a whole lot bunch of players, you have a process and this, that, and the other, but perhaps, we could just start from the beginning of, well, how did the Cauldron come to be? How did you form the Cauldron, and how did you choose who to be in the Cauldron?
Oh, that's a long story. Okay, I'll start at the beginning of this whole process. So the first gulag, that's what we named it until we changed it recently. But the first one, I guess I started it because I was sort of upset about how things were going. I think it was late 2018. Solaris had, I don't know if Solaris had been released yet, but it was around that time when they were talking about Solaris, and the whole rebalancing happened back then with PPC Gauss getting nerfed, SPLs getting nerfed, and I was kind of like, man, is this? I guess I was obsessed about making sure that this wasn't the only way, right? It felt like so many changes back then were done, and they weren't looked back on. Like no one wanted to go back and change it or go back and fix it. It was just change after change after change after change, and no one was really asking for it. And I figured, hey, you know what? Let's go get the community's feedback and see what they're really asking for. And that's how that started. There were a few group changes. I think a few members have come and gone since then, for their own reasons or my
Yeah.
reasons, I guess. But yeah, it was it was kind of interesting to do that the first time, and having it get shot down because PGI didn't want help, stuff like that. And now they wanted help, so I was like, hey, we should try this again. And I bugged Navid and a few other guys, and I was like, hey, you guys want to start another gulag? And that's basically how it started. And
One thing we have to. Why did you call it the Gulag back then?
Well, back then it was I was just kind of thinking of a name, and I was like, well, what are we doing? That was the question that popped up to me, and basically we're giving free work to PGI, and I guess the first thing that popped into my head was, oh look, a gulag, right? It's free labor technically, but prisoners and other stuff, we sort of ignored that part. But the name sort of stuck after a while, and recently we've had to change it. It got a little too edgy, so that's how that happened.
So
Yeah,
did,
and
did you
so now
change it
it's
out of
the
your own volition, or did PGI encourage you to change it?
Oh no, it was the community that encouraged us to change it.
Okay.
and what's the inspiration behind the new name? What is the new name?
Well, the new name is the Cauldron. I figured it was a safer word, and it's pretty harmless. I mean, and I think the
I do
Cauldron.
still like it's a witch's brew, and just throwing in dirty pieces like rat spleens and dung into a big cauldron, mixing it up, and casting curses on people. It's still got a little bit
Okay.
of edge.
Yes, that's pretty much like how it looks. It's like this bubbling like cauldron with stuff in it that kind of like uh looking strange, and we're just like continuously like stirring it up and like
Yeah, we're
adding
stirring
things to
things and
it.
adding things to it.
And
Yeah,
then
it's
it's
fun.
like sometimes it explodes, sometimes it works.
Yeah. So to return to our story, though, yeah, you made an original gulag that didn't really work so well. Now we have a more recent times. You formed what we'll call the Cauldron for all intents and purposes. What spurred you on really to do the Cauldron, and how's that been?
Well, it's been nice to see PGI actually asking for help, right? It's always been an initiative on their part is when the developer decides, "Hey, we need to fix this and we need your help." And now there's a group that can can provide that. It's amazing. It's kind of this symbiotic relationship between players and developers that should have been there since the beginning, but it wasn't for this reason or the other. And I think now it's a really good time to start to keep that going, I guess. And the thing that spurred me on is the April patch. Right when that dropped, everyone was excited. The population came back. I was like, wow, look, it only took one patch for all these podcasts, all these people, all these streamers to come back and look at the game. Imagine what 12 of these patches would look like. Imagine what this game will look like next year in January or in December. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Navid, you've got anything to add on that?
Um, yeah, I mean, mm, the one thing that like for me is something that's like totally different is the change of tone in PGI's interaction with the community. Like when PGI did that podcast, I think in September 2020, and I think it was Russ, Darren, Matt talking about MWO, and basically they were saying that, hey, uh, what do you want in MWO? I mean, some people were like, kind of like smashing their faces against the keyboards, like we've been telling you for like 3 years now, what we want. But I guess like some people, like BearClaw, is like, well, let's just tell them what we want instead of like smashing our faces. So let's form a group and then have like PGI people in. We also have like people from PGI in that group, and it's been amazing working with them. Like uh, Darren and Matt in particular are really open to everything. It's like um, it's a whole new like PGI that we never knew that we're interacting with. But yeah, I mean that has been like the most mm, like mm, like noticeable thing, at least for me. And then I personally believe that now that they're open to these kind of suggestions, let's be genuine. Let's basically like take everything into account. Like let's not like do our own thing. Let's be as inclusive as possible. Like so, it's kind of like that's the whole reason that we have someone or a couple people like really active on the forums or on other um, outlets taking in the feedback, because there's often like each month or like each week people like bring things up that, hey, I've been seeing people bring this up on the forum. What do we think about it? And is it valid, is it not? Because it's been more than one people and it's been more than so yeah, I mean, this these kind of like player towards developers interaction has been pretty nice.
You said something about trying to be as inclusive as possible. Now, one of the questions Spider asked earlier that I'm also interested in is how do you pick the people who are part of your core group, like the guys who actually vote on stuff and take part of the internal discussions?
I think that's a difficult one because you can't just pick like any average Joe Schmo in the game because his opinions may be really radical and he may want to buff LRMs to an insane amount, right? He may have his own agenda. So I think that's the biggest thing we look for is we kind of have to set our own agendas aside. I know there are a few people that have bias in the Gula or the Cauldron right now, and those people are like Jay-Z with his stalker and Data with his ER large lasers, but it's like those are things we can talk about and say, hey, that's kind of weird. Why are we doing this? Like, why is this direwolf getting an ER large HSL buff? And we sort of have to talk them out of it. But for the most part, we're just looking for experience, right? Is people that know the game very well, that have experience, know what they're talking about, and can back up what they're talking about. So, for example, I think Kraz, myself, and Navid have been playing for a while. Like, we're all very, I guess, intimate with the game, not in that kind of way, but we know it from the ground up. So that's something we look for. We kind of look for people that understand how the game is working and are, I guess, aren't very sensitive to criticism, because that's the biggest thing is
So
most of these debates are just very kind of
yeah, okay,
sensitive.
you you've talked a bit about your somewhat selection criteria, but what was the actual process of who you selected? Like, a question I would have is like, of the people who are members of the Cauldron, are most of them predominantly like streamers? Are they online entertainment personalities, or did you go through something like Yar's list and look at the top, you know, players who have played the most games in the most recent seasons and try and reach out and connect to, and contact them?
Well, I picked the names that were is very familiar. Like, I picked very familiar names in comp. I picked people that are running MWO comp, like Kraz and Just Call Me Ash. These guys are MWO comp admins, so they were an obvious pick, right? They run competitive tournaments. They participate in competitive tournaments and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
And
they're big members in the community.
mhm,
But there's what, 20 or so people?
yeah, there's 20 or so people, and some of them are streamers, some of them are competitive players, some of them are, you know, competitive tournament arrangers, and some of them are spreadsheet wizards like Navid. So
All
that's what I
right.
would say.
There could be overlaps too. I mean,
Yeah, there are a lot
Kraz,
of
Kraz,
overlaps.
yeah, I mean, Kraz like organizes leagues and tournaments, and at the same time, he's a team captain, which plays competitively. And of course, like we have people that are mainly like streamers, like more casual side of things, because let's be honest, like a change, as Bear said, like the focus has been to try to gather people that can provide perspectives, like very specialized perspective on a playstyle or on like a certain weight class or uh, like certain locations, for example, on maps and that sort of thing. And we're basically like trying to look for that perspective. Like if we change something, how a player that's with that perspective is going to perceive that change. And then, of course, we have players that predominantly play light mechs, and then mm, we also like have like players like who are not like particularly like um, um funneled into one role, but like kind of like are more like general towards stuff. Like the majority are in that category. And the the main like focus has been that okay, so we need experience and like specialized experience in one thing or the other, or people that can give us like perspective from the larger community. Like they can either have their own opinion, but it's like they have like a greater reach compared to us in like
Yeah, a great example would be
through.
like
Mhm.
Phil and from NGNG TV and Magic Pain Glove. Like those two guys may not be, the most competitive players, but they're in the trenches with the rest of the guys in solo queue and group queue and stuff like that. So getting their
Yeah,
input
they're
is
not
pretty
they're
critical.
not comp. They're obviously I see them a lot in tier one, and you had mentioned earlier it's a wide variety across all the different tiers, but there's only a few streamers who are usually sort of not actually tier one. Once you get if you play the game a lot streaming, you usually sort of figure it out and get up to tier one quite easily, at least from my
Yeah,
experience.
So what I'm wondering about is, you said earlier that you have a wide variety of player, including new player, and that's kind of conflicting to what you've been saying the past few minutes. So do you have any people who are actually completely new to the game, can offer that outside perspective? And if so, how do they get in contact with you, or you get in contact with them?
no, we in the Discord we don't have anybody that's new, but the way we do it is we sort of have our own activities in the Cauldron, and then we present them to the wider community, right? On the forums, on other Discords. Like, for example, we have Mechwarrior 5 Discord. Garen gave us our own channel for Cauldron feedback, and now we can talk to lower tier players, we can talk to newer players, we can talk to people that have no idea who we are and don't frequent the forums, and now we can talk to the wider community, I guess. That's the way I would put it.
Okay, but you have none of those people as part of the core group and taking part in your votes and stuff.
No. Because imagine how, a new player would feel when they're faced with spreadsheets. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean sometimes like in as Bear mentioned, like on the forums or in the Mechwarrior 5 or MWO like official Discord, like because MWO the learning curve is pretty steep, and it's like when someone is starting to play, we're kind of like more interested in the experience the new player is going through. Like of course there are lots of things that are not related to the things that we are doing, but for example, like when we go into the game, like most of us have like a few billion C bills and like loaded accounts with like MC and everything. And there might be stuff that we usually miss when it comes to kind of there is kind of like a separate issue in MechWarrior Online that's not even balance regarding to balance, and that's how a new player gets into the game and how easy it is for that player to stick around, basically. So there's one side of it, of course, like okay, so what do you think about these like mechanics, these weapons, like
Um,
players just starting MWO, they're getting familiar with how things work, And then after that, of course, all of those channels that were mentioned, they can bring something up. And usually we look at it as basically a piece of feedback that needs to be discussed, and it is brought up in discussions.
So one way I would possibly rephrase it from perhaps being instead of saying new player, it would be new player in the sense that if you've been playing the game only for 1 year or even just a few months, you can still actually already figure out the game systems, and if you're pretty decent, already reach your way up to tier 1. And a benefit of being a new player is that you won't necessarily have all the same biases that people had in the past. Like if someone's only been playing the game for a year, they don't even know what it was like before skill tree. So what was their impression of skill tree when they went into it? What was their impression of weapon balance, after it been just stagnant for so long? I know at least a fair number of players, they play a fair amount, they sort of understand the game. They aren't the best, but it's like one guy I play with, it's like, oh, I was really struggling into the game, and then I picked up the Rack 2 Marauder, and I just zoomed all the way up to tier 1. And even though when you guys put you said primarily like, oh, this, we have so much experience, so many experienced players. Well, that misses out on the valuable experience and the fresh perspectives of new players who, at least ultimately what matters is the veracity of someone's arguments, not necessarily how much the experience they have behind it. If somebody says, oh, I think the Arctic cheetah is overpowered with small pulse lasers, well, that might be because they're an old player and they remember its glory days. But that doesn't mean necessarily that right now the Arctic cheetah is dominating all over, and that it's ridiculously overpowered. Their perspective might be skewed from how they've seen it in the past. Whereas a new player might say, "Oh yeah, I tried the Arctic cheetah and it fell apart in seconds. I don't like it." And they actually might be more on the money than the experienced player.
Um, I mean, that's pretty funny because the consensus in the Cauldron is like, yeah, the Arctic cheetah falls apart. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just not a it's not just a good mech.
I know, I know. I
And
just wanted to make a
yeah,
hypothetical that was
yeah, yeah,
actually one is actually true and the other
yeah,
one is
yeah. I
tied to the
understand.
past.
Well, I
Yeah,
think the
the
biggest thing
in
we do
go ahead, go ahead.
is we don't just say based on our experience we know the game better, right? We're actually in the game testing these stuffs. So, for example, if one side of the cauldron says the Arctic cheetah is OP, and the other side of the cauldron is like, wait, is it really OP? Let's test it, and then we come to a conclusion all together in terms of saying, it's kind of trash. So that's one thing that kind of separates us from like the old
So
ways how PGI did it, where they said, "Our word is the law. We have experience, and this is it."
yeah.
I guess I could say that like we have in the group probably like 3 to 4 people that are not really old experience, but people that have started playing in recent years or have become active players in recent years. I think we have people like Cyclone Jack, Starwolf, I guess was it Nutty Rat, and there are also a couple people in there that I don't know even, and I don't know like what their like when they started the game, but they're there because they have other ideas regarding the technical side of the game, just like stuff like performance, frames per second, like what's in the game that's not optimized, like to kind of like craft proposals on that front to kind of like improve the game like performance wise. But um like there are like views like that in the Cauldron as well. Also like people that play other games mainly, and and Mechwarrior Online, and then when it comes to like maps and like matchmaking, that sort of stuff, um that's their inputs are kind of like valued. With regards to getting involved, um I think we had a conversation with like regarding this like when we were just starting. Okay, so who do we invite, like how open this thing should be. And I think the consensus back then, like again, as a like a larger group, was that all right, so let's have some sort of like representative of an idea or of a group here. And then one thing that we would try to do as best as we can is to be present and active and responsive, like on various channels. It's like it shouldn't. I don't want, like I've been told like people as well. Like I don't want this to be some sort of like behind the scenes like uh, group that decides things for the rest of the players without them knowing. It's like, okay, so put everything out there and let people challenge it, and let people challenge it, and let's see if we can defend our ideas. Because if we cannot defend what we put forward, then I mean there's a problem. Like, can we like justify the things that we can do in, because this is not that it changed for us. Like there we have, like in fact we have a couple people in the group that when they're suggesting changes, that hey, if we do this in competition it's going to be good, or like yeah, in faction play it's going to be good. And like usually the response is that hey, no one cares about competition. This game is played in quick play majority, and it's played by the average player. So you shouldn't expect to like take your comp spec mech into quick play and try to craft everything around it. And I think that's one of the biggest fear on the forums that I noticed. It's like, hey, these guys are trying to craft something that matches their agenda. And to be honest, we have people in the Cauldron that push for those. And basically, what we're basically look at them as a perspective. It's like, hey, these guys saying that hey, if you do this, you're gonna hurt this like side of competition, or it's gonna be good. Well, that's fine. I mean, if we're just telling them like, okay, so this is your idea, can you defend it against like in front of like average player? Because I cannot find excuses for your demands. Like, just needs to be open, needs to be challenged. Yeah.
If I may, I would like to elaborate on that because you just brought up a really important point. That's also my impression of the Gulag, or at least, honestly, that is quite my personal opinion as well. It's really hard to understand what you guys are doing since it very much feels like you are closed off. Yeah, you're communicating on the forum, you're posting regularly, you're reading regularly, but what you're actually discussing is still completely closed off. So I'm just wondering, have you ever considered something like putting your discussion from a private Discord onto a public forum where people cannot post and participate, but at least read what you're doing? Something like that. Is that something you have considered and brought up?
One, I think one thing it relates to what I was saying is that before we started, we had a roadmap. We had a like planned, like we're not just discussing things. At least for these couple months, we're not discussing things out of the blue. Like I think it was in November 2020. There was like a podcast out there that was posted on the forums. Then we basically like mentioned that hey, these are the main areas that we're gonna be focusing on, like weapon balance, mech agility, like equipments, rescale, and skill tree. So these are going to be the areas that we're going to discuss and we're going to propose ideas in. And there were a lot of feedback on the forums on that regard. If we want to start thinking about something, uh, I would say we would definitely put it on the forums. It wouldn't spontaneously like jump into existence. For now, we're still within that kind of like openly defined parameters that we have put forward like back in November and kind of like reiterated in April patch notes. I think in April patch notes, I think we kind of like went over the steps that we are going to take, and we're not going to deviate from that, like start any new conversation until those are kind of like mainly addressed. Apart from that, again, we had people on the Cauldron that basically like sent us a message that, hey, I have ideas for the matchmaker, and this is it. Can I come in? Can I present this? And we're like, sure, just because we don't have anyone on this front. If you have something to discuss, bring it forward. But when it comes to, for example, mixed and weapons, we're like, okay, so we have people to like discussing this stuff already, and if you have some sort of like posts or like proposal, the just directly send it to us, and we would just post it directly on our channel,
So
and it would start the conversation.
yeah. One thing I feel, this is just my broad impression about, like, for example, the April patch, is, when we read the patch notes, it's like there's a big blurb at the start saying, "Oh, we're the Gulag. We're not going to say who exactly we are, but don't worry, we're qualified." Da, 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 da. And that's a very people-oriented approach, but it doesn't give you any particulars. And then we have all just the actual changes and values with the and the explanations each briefly for them, which is a very numbers oriented thing. It's the end. In the end, it's the changes that matter, not so much from that perspective. I really like the numbers changes, at least in the sense that they were actually reasoned. They mostly made sense, et cetera, et cetera. But it's always that beginning with the big blurb talking about, oh, this is who we are. But then there's only a couple of you who actually reach out, and they can't speak for the whole Cauldron, and there's a lack of transparency on that side. So it's like, instead of picking just a numbers approach or just a people's approach, it's it's kind of a little bit of an awkward mix. At least that would be my vague impressions right now. And
Yeah,
that,
it
at least on
is.
the people side of things, at least how am I, just random Joe Schmo, supposed to be able to find out who even is in the Cauldron? All I've heard is that you guys have credentials. I don't even know who they are.
Maybe
Yeah,
if
this has
I
been brought up a few times about like we should release a list of people who are involved, and I haven't been opposed to it, but I don't think anyone's really gone forward with it yet in the Cauldron.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
in the end, I feel like it's really tricky. My feedback would just be that it's very, very, very difficult to do the whole interacting with the community and being basically a whole community management team. That is something you would like need full-time job full of like 10, 20 people to. A lot of people. You need a lot of people to cater to the MWO fan base.
yeah,
And that would be a full-time job. This is a fan project. This is what you're doing in your spare time for fun. In the end, what should matter, therefore, is instead just the numbers and being dedicated to discussing the numbers. If your numbers are good and you're obsessing about that, and people in the end trust your numbers, then the proof is in the pudding. That would
yeah,
be my approach.
I think for me it's more about the message we're sending rather than the people behind the message. I would
Hmm.
say it's a message of, hey, we're trying to make the game better, and hopefully we are making the game better. And if the message is consistent with the numbers, then I mean, my hope is that that would be enough. But again, if it needs more, we can always give more.
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was asking about earlier. So let me bring a more precise example. In a sphere, Jrnyman's streak missiles, you made a change to them, and you gave a kind of broad point explaining why you're changing stuff up, and then you gave the number. For me, I looked at it and I couldn't quite understand how you came to the conclusion of changing it that way. And that's kind of my difficulty. Like, your internal discussion is internal, and I'm basically completely relying on this tiny text blob you put in front of the numbers. Like, why are you doing those changes? And that's why I was wondering if you have at all considered, if you've considered it, just say so. Putting your discussion on a public forum, like, so I could read up. I don't care about names. Just take a look at what arguments brought this side, what arguments are for the other side, and just read up and like, oh yeah, okay, your conclusion makes totally sense now, I fully understand it, or I think you missed an argument, I can give you more precise input on that. Have you considered something like that?
Yes, after the April patch. It's like, okay, so this is what we thought, and this is what gets the ball rolling. And then it's like we just look at the effect and not from our perspective, from what people are experiencing. It's like basically, like any other group, we really don't have a way to test anything that we provide live. We can test it offline, of course, but some of the things that you wouldn't be able to kind of like get a sense with offline testing because there's certain counters that don't exist in offline testing. And basically we're just the testing is limited because PGI cannot like provide us with a PTS so we can iterate. So we're just relying on patches. For example, regarding a specific weapon system, we try to explain the process, although it's not always kind of like might not be adequate. Like we try to make it clear. If something is not clear, it can be brought up. For example, streak SRM missiles. Of course, we have identified like with the changes that we made. Like, okay, so we have focused on one aspect, but in that particular example, we ignored something, and let's like to just like say it's like we ignored the prevalence of AMS that's going to be flying around. So we kind of like curbed the performance on one side and then didn't realize that okay, so now that you've done this, you need to counterbalance it with something else because that thing that you just did was for one purpose, but you have to like take measures to like uh keep it from being completely useless. And we try to test that. I mean, that was something that I was noticing on the forums. It's like, okay, so let's just run streaks, see how it goes. And basically, my experience was like, oh boy, this thing needs to change. And yeah, I mean, of course, this mm, mm, from like now going onwards, for example, the changes that we are like going to do for I don't know snub nose ppcs based on the feedback that we're receiving, it like usually it goes like this. People on the group are saying that some I don't think there's anything wrong with snub nose ppcs, and then there are people that hey, you should look at the forums, there is something wrong and people are experiencing this, and it has a negative impact on their gameplay because this and that happened. I mean, sure, you don't find it a problem, but I don't know, like 10,000 people do. Um, same thing goes for other systems. I mean, even if someone notices something, I would say I would agree with Bear if it's good to have a number of people in the Cauldron known to the community. Like even if you don't want to put like all of them forward, just even sending us like a direct message on the forums, on Discord, whatever. That means that what you have to say will get discussed and will get mentioned. And
Yeah, that
yeah.
sounds nice. But of course, it's a bit like how PGI would say, of course,
Hmm.
right? We're going to open up a thread, put your thoughts here, and then the what was it, the March patch came out, and everyone's like, "What the hell?" No one was asking asking for this,
Yeah,
and you don't because it's it's a closed system inside PGI. It's a closed system within the Cauldron. You don't actually know whether anyone actually took your words and discussed them or even brought them forward. It's just you just put it in the ballot box and you don't know what happens to it.
yeah. That's the difficulty. Is how do you make sure all of those people's inputs are being responded to? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in the Cauldron right now. Is just being able to grab all of this information and trying to process it and condense it and I guess make sense of it. That's the biggest
It's
thing.
Yeah, very difficult
Mm.
because there's so many different angles you can look
Yeah,
at
there's
MWO.
so many different perspectives, and some of them are outlandishly wild, and some of them are right. Some of them are, hey, I'm getting one shot in a light mech because triple snubs and AC-20, and internally we look at that and we're like, wait, that is happening, and I am doing that. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficulty because we have to sort of filter out the crazy stuff that doesn't make sense, and then we have to look at the stuff that does make sense and the complaints that are legitimate, and then we have to test those complaints, and then we have to make changes internally for the next patch.
Yeah, there's also another aspect is that like usually the stuff like this, mm, like even in other concepts like governments, usually they have some form of like representatives, and they do the stuff, or they decide they put it out for kind of like people to see, and they look at feedback and they're like, oh hey, I need to improve on this, I need to kind of like put this forward for discussion. And one thing
Uh,
that was
I'm a little
actually
bit
being
more of a
discussed.
technocrat than that. I would say that
Yeah,
you get some
it was,
schmuck, you elect him to the Ministry of
yeah.
Health, and then he has a whole bunch of bureaucrats who actually know what they're talking about, who have been doing this for
Hmm.
decades. Give him a few proposals, and he chooses from them, rather than
Yeah,
it. I mean, his job is to to work for his constituents and to listen to what they have to
yes.
say, but he has to work with the experts.
Yeah, there's one, like this particular discussion was brought up 2 months ago in the Cauldron. It's like, okay, so do we want to open the Discord and make it public? And the consensus, including PGI, is like, hey, uh, in order to keep things efficient, to keep decision making efficient, because they have deadlines that need to make. It's like before every patch, there's a lock in date. Okay, so everything that you want in needs to be final by this date. If it's not by this date, it wouldn't matter. It's not going to get in. And on the forums, like I've been on the forums for 9 years now, and like I have like 12,000 posts in. And based on what I can see, nothing gets decided when like on something like a forum. It's like at the end you need to make a decision, and that decision means that hey, they didn't listen to me. And you would have a few thousand people. I was like, they didn't listen to me. I brought this up, they didn't listen. And then for that few thousand people, there are a few thousand other people that say, oh, they listened to me. And it's kind of like it becomes a challenge reaching to a conclusion, because it gets noisy enough that okay, so what should we do, like what's the decision? And then there's suddenly like a few hundred posts for the smallest things, and then you cannot reach a decision.
Yes. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone would ever suggest that because obviously it's not feasible. But what about making the Discord public? But anyone who joins can only read, not post anything, just read. Not take part in the conversation, just read what you guys are discussing.
I'm not opposed to the idea, but like, how many people are we talking about? Are we talking about, say, 10 or 100 or 1,000?
I don't know. It would be interesting to see though, because from
So
my
the
perspective, I
proposal
feel
would be
like one
like,
of the
yeah, so
main issues you guys currently have is not necessarily getting good results. I think you guys are very much capable of, in the long term, finding really good results for the community. I feel like one of your main issues is trust, building trust. And I mean, you guys brought up politics. The best way for politicians to gain trust is to make everything public. And I'm wondering if this might be something you should do. Even if it's only 100 people, I mean, that's 100 people you've convinced and brought on your side to support you on the forums and stuff. Right? Better than nothing.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think we should discuss that in the Cauldron in these next coming days, is just try to figure out a way to make discussions public. And I think it's a good thing, but again, it comes with its drawbacks. It comes with, what if these people take what we're talking about out of context, and all of a sudden we have an
Yeah.
issue, and it sort of comes with the territory. But Yeah,
but
I
it
think
also
it's an
means you
interesting
don't have
idea.
to. It also means because it's basically open government, you can't just
Yeah,
badmouth people's ideas and such. You have to
exactly. That's
always be, professional, even in
mm.
your discussions. But then again, always being professional means you're always sort of stuck at the office when this isn't a job.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is like in those discussions is we all know each other, we're all familiar with how we talk, and if someone says something bad, it's like, ah, that's just his opinion, and then if his opinion gets taken as law, then that certain person he talked about or those certain people he talked about, well, guess what? Now they're all upset because he said they suck or they're bad at the game. We have a few people that kind of talk very casually, so
Yeah, I mean the discussions often get really heated. Like
oh
I'm
yeah,
saying, like
especially like mobility. That one
really,
was fun.
really, yeah, really heated. And like we're basically like trying to not like keep it only exclusive to the game mechanics and not involving like personal things. Um, so I guess that's something that's like we can consider, like
Yeah,
making it more open. There's another thing that I think we could improve is that like PGI has a lock-in date for every patch, and so far, of course, for the weapon balance um, patch, we had enough time to put the values out before the lock-in date. And for example, for mobility, because like the schedule was so tight, like April patch was on 20th, and then we was it 10 days? It's like we only have like a certain amount of time. It's like, okay, the lock-in
I
date is
think it was a
coming.
week.
Yeah, the lock-in date is coming, and we need to prepare something for before the lock-in date, and preferably we need to have it before they lock it, because we want to put it out before it is final, before it's kind of like, as they say, locked in. So if there's something people bring up, we can apply it before it's locked in, because when something is going to be locked in and then you put it out, it's like, what's the point? So people just like talk about it, and then patch arrives and it goes through anyway, and it gives an impression that, hey, they don't care, they don't listen. And I think that's one thing that we need to kind of like get ahead of the curve. Like, as I mentioned, I wish the Cauldron was faster in in doing some things, so we could put things out at a faster pace, so that real time feedback can have an effect on the patch that's coming out next week. Sorry, next after this, and then it goes on and on and on for months after, rather than like putting it out right at the lock-in date and then say to people that, hey, this, you see this is going in for May or June, whatever.
Yeah.
um
One
yeah,
incident I'd
it's
like to bring up is that I think before PGI had talked to us about what was really happening for the May patch, I think Ash made a Reddit post, and it was the entire mobility pass for May, right? And he did that before PGI told us, hey, we're working on Mech 5 and we can't get everything in, and now he's eating shit on the forums. So yeah, it was a bit of a, well, I guess a bit of a misplay on our part and a bit of a misplay on Ash's part to say things early. And we sort of had an internal conversation about, hey, we need to make sure we're talking about things that are actually going to go into the patch. And again, it's really difficult when time constraints are so tight with PGI, and they have lock-in dates and stuff like that. And then yeah, it's
yeah,
it's weird.
yeah, I mean, there's like also another thing that I think that May patch being so limited, I wouldn't say limited, because there are some things in there that's really good, but the May patch, like they them not putting like all of these mobility things in was a blessing, because now we've had time to go over the feedback, change stuff, and I guess like some of the stuff that were actually like the data collection back then when we did it was not done like in a rigorous way, I would say. Don't want to name any names, uh, but yeah, I think yeah, Byter here is actually like has been like a great help in that regard. And then some time ago, like regarding some of the weapon changes, I think he sent me and Kraz like some of his documents, which were like really helpful. And it would be like when it comes to quirks, because that's also another ongoing discussion that's going on. It's like nothing is decided literally, and for the quirks, so that's something that people can get involved, like have like unfortunately we had some things planned for May with regards to quirks, like not the full quirk pass, like showcasing stuff that can be done, so that people can go wild with imagination. It's like don't limit your suggestions to the stuff that you can see in the game, but consider like these as possible options as well, and then we're open to suggestions, like just and then like it's basically legit open to suggestions, like if you think something is bad, just put it forward. And yeah, getting back on topic, yeah, I would say that there are some areas that we can improve, specifically with regards to how feedback and how open some of these ideas are before it's being locked in uh, by PGI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
To put the squeeze.
Go on, better.
All right. To try and put the squeeze a bit more, though, do you think there's any biases or weaknesses in the Cauldron's makeup right now beyond just how you address feedback?
Oh, sure. There are many inconsistencies. Like, for example, is when, since we have people that are all over the planet, we have to sort of, it's like sending smoke signals, right? Is we put up a vote for, say, what champion mech is going to be in May, and then the vote stays up for a day, right? And we get
Yeah.
half the responses, and then it's just like, oh, okay, people are responding. And again, it's not our day job, and it's not our, you know, primary source of income. So, doing this casually is like it's gonna take time, and sometimes that time costs us a lot of, say, community input or something. And I wish it didn't, but again, it's like getting all of the people in the Cauldron involved is a bit of a task, even if it's like, say, 20 people, because these 20 people could be in Zimbabwe and Timbuktu, and now I'm texting at 9 a.m. from California, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'll wait 12 hours for him to respond. So a bit
Yeah,
of a difficulty there.
yeah. Also, with regards to bias, of course, we have people that are heavily biased
Yep.
towards certain things in the
Certain
game. It's
mechs,
like,
certain weapons, like
yeah,
Jay-Z and his stalkers, and Data and his
yeah.
ER large lasers. Like,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah. Sometimes, like, they brought something up, and honestly, we just have to go over it and separate genuine feedback from agenda. It's like, oh, okay, so what are you after with this? And
Yeah.
kind of like open this up and discuss it with them. It's mm, like these would be the effect of the things that you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Do you know about this, or that's your intention? And like that's kind of like mm, one of the areas that I mentioned that there needs to be improvement is that opening up something to the public before it's being decided and kind of like locked in makes you like in a closed group, it's so easy to be biased. There's very little consequence for being biased in a closed group. You can just like say whatever you want. But can you defend it in public? Okay, so um,
Well,
people,
even in public, you
yeah,
get issues like the Brown Sea, where there's a lot of nonsense spewed out in the forums and by people,
yes,
and
I
it's
mean,
just,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, can you defend it in public? It's like go out there, post it on the forums, or basically like based on what you see on the forums, do you think this is going to be accepted? Do you think that, for example, there has been some outlandish ideas in the cauldron? It's like sometimes like people are like, oh, okay, so just right now go make a forum post and present it. See how like just think about how you can like phrase this without getting flamed, because it's not popular. What is being asked is not popular. People don't want it.
And
It's going to make the
sometimes,
game, yeah, it's going to make the game worse for them. It's going to make the game better for you, but it's going to make the game worse for them. And that's why that's not going in. So it's kind of like, as I said, personally, I want that aspect to be improved. Like when something is being discussed, for example, with this mobility patch, like we've put it out there, and we saw that people were like, well, these values that you put out, um, light mechs are not getting much needed attention, considering that, for example, we're making all these bigger mechs like more agile, more snappy, and we have better weapons, more efficient, more damage output, and light mechs need help, and which was a valid feedback.
Hmm.
And then we just like think about it, it's like, yeah, they're right. Like this is actually valid. And then we realized that, hey, PGI said, oh, we cannot put these mobility changes for May, and we're like, oh, great, that's actually pretty good, because now we can apply these the feedback that we've received, and correct course on what we were doing. So yeah, I mean, of course, I would like to see that aspect improved. I have to give credit also to Kraz, because he's been religiously responding to people, like taking apart arguments, not in a negative way. I mean, it's like just spending time like responding to particular points, and if there's a point in an argument, in his perspective, or if the point is made that we cannot immediately kind of like know the answer, it's like, hey, this guy has a point and I don't know the answer, and it's a valid point. So how do we approach this? How is it going to work? But
Yeah,
yeah, as I said, I mean, there can be improvement on that front.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember some, discussions where, even though it's sort of somewhat in public, there's this Cauldron members who come up with flagrantly wrong responses to things I've said. Like, I remember, what was it? Darren was on NGNG, and I'd posted in the chat, in our last podcast, you had said you were going to release some data on weapon usage values. That way, we can tell, I would be interested to see that, so therefore I can get more appropriate feedback. And a member of the Cauldron responded saying, "Oh, whenever was this said? Oh, you're making up bullshit. You're a noob." And I was like, "Well, actually, mate, I'm top couple hundred players on MWO with thousands of hours played. Why are you contradicting me here?" In MWO comp, I brought up the Streak Narc Arctic Wolf, and we had a couple of prominent Cauldron members saying, "You're absolutely balmy. Why are you putting Streak and ATM together?" Well, so I said, they both have about 5-second cooldown, and they're both just lock-ons. You aim, you press R, you shoot when you get the lock. It's why are you using the narc? It has a narc quirk. And there was one person, they're said to be really good at the spreadsheets, and I said, you know, 6 narc has less missile health than the 4 ATM 3 and 3 streak 6s. And he's like, no, that's ridiculous. It's like, fine, I'll do the math. Look, it's 3 times the missile health.
Yeah, I mean,
Ta-da!
I remember. that conversation, and it's like, okay, so missile health. Uh, there's another aspect to all of this that we just like take into account, that we also write tools like programs and kind of like simulations, because the tests are offline. We cannot know some effects, like for example AMS. That's one thing that we cannot predict, because uh, you can't have your missiles being shut down by AMS in testing grounds. So you have to kind of like go through and replicate the mechanics using a program, using a simulator, a real-time simulator. And then there are other factors
You can't do private
that
lobby as well, I think, right?
no, no, no,
No, it's
no.
only testing grounds that works, unfortunately. So
Yep.
like our
Oh,
testing is
when you're
really
changing the
limited.
values. Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
But in that discussion, it was just, I made a claim which was volley health, the total health of
yeah,
the
yeah,
volley. What you were trying to contend with, or someone was trying to contend with, was
yeah.
how resistant it is to AMS, how likely
Yes,
it's
I
to get through.
remember. Yeah, I remember that. It was me. It's like, yeah, of course, missile health is like the deciding factor, but not the only one, since you also have like the missile velocity, like how
Yeah,
fast it can cut through the bubble, and so forth and so on. So it's
yeah.
kind of like even
There's a
some
lot
of
to
the
debate,
mhm,
but the thing
yeah,
was that there was a lack of charity in that whole discussion. I
yeah,
make a simple claim of this one has more volley health, and you're like, ha, no. That was your
yeah,
response. That
yeah.
you were
I mean,
actually clearly wrong. What I said, the volley had 3 times the volley health, and
yeah,
I was particular with my words.
yeah. No, I remember the conversation. It's like the perception that was like from my side is like, which volley is more efficient in getting past AMS. Of course, you were right in terms of like missile health.
We
Like
know the six
yeah, yeah,
narc mech is kind of a joke. At least it's a
yeah.
silly
It
mech
is.
build. The thing
It
was
is.
the streak ATM narc build is it's dealing damage and getting intel. It's doing two things at once. Once you've narked the opponent, the six narc mech can't do anything else. Whereas the ATM narc together, the
Hmm.
two weapons work together, and it's like butting my head against the wall because it's an unorthodox strategy, but it does actually make sense. And
I mean,
I understand Rando is not
yeah.
getting it, but you need
No,
to be more charitable.
yeah. The build itself, I don't think I have anything against it. I remember people trying to mock it, but I really don't do that because I run some really weird shit on my mechs, and like even on the Cauldron, like people kind of like take jabs at me. Of course, you would run it, but this it's stupid. I'm like,
Yeah, we
well,
get some flaming internally about like,
yeah.
hey, we should try this out and see if it works. And
I mean, even
yeah,
like
Yeah,
normally, like I'm usually getting flamed, and Jay Z I think is getting flamed usually. It's like, yeah, I mean, you would run it, but a sane person wouldn't. Or I remember like even like someone was saying like, I'm like, okay, so I run this combo, and it's pretty effective. And people were like telling me that, oh yeah, people even with one single brain cell wouldn't run this thing that you run. I was like, okay, but I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing because I can see the results. So I mean,
yeah.
for example, streaks and ATMs. I actually have a mech with streaks and ATMs. I mean, it doesn't have a narc, but still, it keeps me. It helps me like focus more on like synergizing those two rather than a narc, or kind of like have more ammo or weapons. I don't argue the validity of that. And then on that discussion in
Do you
particular, it's
still
like,
argue? Are you still going to argue how you fire the weapons?
oh yes, I mean it's like, because um, one doesn't fire without a lock, the other fires without a lock, and mistiming a lock usually means you get like a face full of projectiles. So that's why I'm like saying that I actually do have a mech
I meant in terms
with
of
yeah,
timing
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, timing. like I do have a mech with ATMs and streaks, and like if it wasn't valid, I wouldn't be running it. So the timing is the main issue on that mech. It's like sometimes the streaks, like the way, at least like personally I play it, is that when I'm entering a fight, I hold my finger on the trigger and basically like keep it that way. So the moment I get a lock, the missiles fire. It doesn't matter. Like if especially if the target has ECM or stealth armor, it's like I can be safe from losing locks by just like keeping my finger on the trigger. With ATMs, there's a little bit of disconnect in the timing aspect. It, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. If your target is like dead in front of you and you have the jump on it, of course, and it's very effective actually. It deals a lot of damage, and the streaks are going to be better in Made too. So that's
I think we
like
shouldn't
another
go
thing.
too off track, but the point was is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I
of
said
course.
you
Yes.
could just, to avoid AMS, you can press and fire the weapons at the appropriate juncture to to actually fire them both together and have the ATMs take the brunt.
Yeah,
And
there's no.
you acted as if that wasn't an obvious logical choice, which is silly. You're a silly
Yeah, I
Billy.
mean, that's you can do that.
Yep,
And still I
you can
think
do that.
it's
Story
yeah,
issue
yeah,
closed.
yeah,
Thank you
and
for the
then
clarity.
If
yeah,
Navid, I'm
and the
sorry, but
rest
if
of
I
it.
may cut
Yeah,
this
go ahead.
discussion off here,
Okay, yeah.
I feel like
That's
you
what I'm
two
saying.
have
Just thanks for
something
the
that you might
clarity.
want to discuss afterwards. Because you said something really interesting earlier that I would like you to elaborate a bit on. Taking it offline, running real-time simulations, and modifying files. As far as I remember from all the way back in beta, Mechwarrior Online is notoriously hard to modify without the game just kicking you out. So I'd be very much interested in hearing a couple of things about those. What you can do, and what you can do while playing offline, and what's just not possible to do. If you have some intel to share on that.
Um, I don't know, like if because I've asked PGI regarding this particular matter, and they said that it's better if this doesn't get public. This way of changing things, um, like how you could, but basically like changing stuff like weapon stats or like mobility, skill tree values, equipment stats. For example, you might have noticed that Case is now 0 tons in the game, and like in a sphere LB2s are now like 3 slots. Those are the things that were tested offline and kind of like we went through and tried to see if uh, what builds are possible and what's gonna be the effect. Like just
So
build the mech and see. Yep.
is this something you
Go ahead.
can test in the actual Mechwarrior Online client? As obviously taking it offline, or is this something you have to do in a third-party tool?
It's in Mechwarrior Online client, but you cannot do any sort of like online activity
Yeah.
with it. So it's kind of like that's yep.
And what are
That's how it
the
works.
kind of things you can test online? Obviously, like stat changes are probably somewhat easy. Game mechanics, I would assume, are impossible.
Depends on what you want to change. Like what game mechanics do you want to change? Is there any um are you trying to make something work in a different way? Is that different way already in the game or not? Um um I mean, it is very limited in terms of game mechanics. So
One thing I
It
would
would
like to
be
share is
yeah.
I was fumbling around with the weapon stats, and I was like, hey, can I make a hag in this game? And I showed it to a couple of the guys, and it was pretty funny to see a Gauss rifle like fire 4 times in a row on one charge. I was just like, man, if this was in the game, it would break it.
That's a pretty old video by now, right? Where someone posted that on YouTube, the hack and Mechwarrior
yeah,
Online.
I think someone posted that before. I mean, we also have like close contact with those guys
Yeah, they're
in
fun
the
people
old
to talk
times.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, they can do a lot more than just like changing stats offline, but we'll keep it on that. keep keep it
Okay.
on
So
yeah.
One thing to touch in relation to this, though, is obviously the whole matter of feedback. Is that people will come to you with plenty of ideas, but they don't know what is or isn't feasible or how feasible it is. So, changing things like a map, people would love to have that happen, or a new map, etc., etc. But obviously, that's not something you can do with XML edits. So, as far as the
Yeah.
Cauldron is concerned, it would be great if you guys could at some point come out with some posts that you could refer people to and say, all right, here are the easy changes that can be done in game. We can change slot values, we can change tonnage values. If you want to change the hard points of a mech, what are the limitations for that? So, if there's not an energy hard point modeled on this part of the mech,
Hmm.
we can't put a PPC there, even if we change it, or the
Yeah.
PPC model won't appear. Or just if you list out all the mechanics of the game, that will help steer people in the right direction, help steer conversations, because that's often what I see. A lot of people is they want to get involved, but a lot of them aren't too familiar with how games are even made and how how reasonable their suggestions even are.
Yeah, sometimes their whims and desires are not what we can do, right? Like Navid can edit XMLs, but changing a map, changing mechs on a hard point, that's something Navid can't necessarily do because he's not an engineer. I
I
mean,
mean,
he's not a 3D modeler,
there's
so
there's one thing. It's like, for example, we have regarding hard points on mechs. We have brought something up with PGI because you can do it. You can basically like edit XMLs and add existing hard points for a chassis to a variant. For example, let's say a variant has like a ballistic hard points in this location, and you're like, oh, I'd like to have that variant and the combination of other that hard point and a combination of other hard points on a new mech, and I want to have it in game, and well, that's a new mech. Yes, it can be done. However, we brought it up to PGI because from our perspective, it's like, oh, it's easy. They can do it quickly, but we brought it up, and the engineer actually in charge of that, it's like, that's not an option for now. So we're like, okay, so this is, and basically they're saying that, oh, this is off the table. So
Yeah.
just forget it, just forget it. And then map design, that is something basically completely up to PGI. I think they've hired a new map designer.
by the way,
Mm,
their map designer is an amazing guy. He's
yeah, he
been doing
is.
some really fun work.
Yeah,
Wish I could show
he's an
you guys, but yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna have to wait
uh,
till May.
Hmm.
yeah.
It is May.
He's yeah.
Oh, the patch. Sorry, I should be more specific
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah, he's been doing like some great work, but again, like if like on that front, um, we are basically just like other people. It's like I've seen some like ideas that people bring up, and sometimes some of those ideas are kind of like what I'm thinking about, but um, like PGI has already stated that, hey, we need more manpower on the engineering side to implement these stuff. For example, some of the ideas I see on the forums like point to even how like arm reticles and camera views work in MW, and that could be improved, which is valid. Like that has been a problem like for a long time, and but that is something that like PGI on a deep engineering level need to solve, and is not really something that we can change, or
Yeah.
performance issues. Um,
Yeah, but it would be really good to know what could
mhm,
actually or couldn't be done. Like if I come up with a suggestion like, oh, wouldn't it be great that you have Hunchback with energy hunch but missile hunch on the other side? Those are in the game. You should be able to do it. It's like, well,
mhm,
that's a great idea, but they need an engineer for that. And just being able to refer somebody to a sheet so that we
mhm.
get past all those recommendations will filter out a lot of noise.
Yeah, a bit of red light, green light. That would
Yeah.
be good.
Yeah, I would like based on like a few interactions, I would avoid that because ultimately we're not the ones who decide what's possible and what's not. I mean, like we could think of something as possible, and we could like put it out there, and you create some sort of like, I'm just like talking about PGI's perspective and what they have mentioned. It's like you can create an expectation, and it is something that you weren't aware of. Like you assumed that it was possible, but you didn't check with us, and now there's this expectation in the community that, oh yeah, it is super easy to do. PGI just doesn't want to do it, and even without engineers, it's easy, but PGI doesn't want. So like I would avoid that situation, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who decide what's possible, and if they have the manpower to
Yeah.
implement it. Well, we can just do the suggestion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Expectation
if something,
management is obviously very important. So if this kind of list would exist, it would have to be something like, these are things we know for a fact we cannot do, rather than
Mhm.
these are things we
yeah,
think
it would
are
have to
possible.
be from PGI side if they
Mm.
wanted to make sure that was out. Because from our side, we don't know internally what PGI is up to. So again, what
Yeah.
players see and players want may not be what developers can do at a moment's notice. So
And this is a
I
great segue into
personally,
my last question. Okay, Byter, sorry.
yeah,
Dang
I
it.
just I'll just finish off by saying I personally like resources like MechDB, Smurfies, even somewhat like the Wikia, and having the community put out more resources to help us figure out how the game can be edited would just help with the quality of conversations.
oh yes, it would. I would love that.
Yeah. All right, so final question for me for today. Communication with PGI. You've mentioned a couple of things where how you do it. I recall one of the earlier podcasts featured Darren saying they have regular meetings with you guys now. Can you give us a bit of insight how the communication process works with PGI?
Sure. It sort of works like what we're doing now is we sort of they they schedule it. They're like, hey, can we meet at this time and this day? And everyone that can show up shows up, and we talk about, say, for example, if we're meeting with the map guy, Francois, then Francois and Darren will show up, and we'll just talk about a specific map or a specific topic, and we just go over things that we've prepared or we have, I guess we're able to come up with for that topic, like for weapons or for mobility. And if situations change, they tell us if they're overworked with Mech 5 and they can't quite get everything in, they'll tell us. Hopefully a bit sooner than this most recent incident, but yeah, every meeting has been pretty interesting, and the best part is that PGI has made the attempt to say, "Hey, we're listening. Hey, we're communicating," and they are, and it's very amazing to see, going from complete silence, smoke and mirrors. This is a mystery to now, hey, they're in our Discord, they're honest with us, and they're giving us updates on how they're doing internally and what we're talking about, and it's amazing. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great from your perspective, but for me, I of course see nothing of it, and this gets into the whole point again of just about openness, and that for us, it's like, oh, we hear that this other group that we don't know too much about, they're kind of closed off from the world, is talking to PGI behind closed doors. Well, that doesn't necessarily inspire me much confidence when I have no idea about any of that's going on.
Yeah, this is the difficult part. Is like what we discuss internally, their vlogs. It's just a matter of consistency. That's, I think, the biggest thing here is they have to really nail down their vlogs. I think they mentioned they would do 2 a month, and really we've only been getting 1 a month, and
Yeah.
it's hard to tell them, hey, do your job, when their job is MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5, and it's just like, what do I do?
Yeah, yeah. And there's no easy answer about just saying, oh, we'll just make our meetings with them public, because in the end, that's just basically a dev log. And at least it's their actual job. They have to be much more careful about what goes out.
Yeah,
Whereas
and
if
I would
somebody
assume,
makes a mistake, it doesn't really matter so much in a as a fandom.
yeah, I would assume the conversations between BGI and the Cauldron are not something that you guys want to do public, because then BGI wouldn't be able to be as open. So maybe the solution
Yeah.
would be to just write a summary at the end, like we've talked about this today, some points that were brought up. But yeah. Well, that is something for you guys to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something for
Yeah,
us to work on.
Yeah, definitely. It can be improved. Also, like something that as we went on, like after like April patch, that we kind of like made it clear is that before this whole uh, cauldron thing, like on the forums, on other like mm, channels like Discord, Reddit, and that sort of stuff. Um, so far, all of us have been basically like players, like any other player out there, and interactions with the community was basically on a personal level. It's mm, like because we were noticing, like I'm also like guilty of this, that people on the forums were kind of like uh discussing something with bias, or kind of like dismissing something on the forums and here and there. That's because like it's kind of like a personal thing. It's like people give their opinions, or start debating something. I think
Fans are passionate, but
yes,
it's hard to
yeah,
remain dispassionate.
Yeah, it's
yes,
hard to remove that passion from
yeah,
people. Like,
yeah, and
want to
then
make
it's like
opinions or input. It's just,
yeah,
what are we
and then
doing?
after the patch, it's like we kind of like that was a course correction that we kind of did with a couple like instances that well, right now, if people are associating you with this cauldron, then you have to be more calculated with what you respond, or you have to be more open, look from like from different perspective. That's basically like links into what
More
you were
professional.
saying. Yeah, more like you were saying, it's like because you might be responding from your personal perspective, but the person who's reading the response is assuming that you're deciding things for him, and it's like even if it's not the case, you're giving that impression, and it's not you shouldn't discourage feedback, because like, oh, people are like, okay, so they're just gonna uh kind of like shit on me, like why would I like even discuss with them? They're just like any other, like they're just like another version of the person who shall not be named. So that's something we want to avoid and kind of like improve on. And I think we try to correct course uh the like mid-April onwards, that hey, this is supposed to be like a gateway um for players to kind of like mm, put their ideas in, or
Or
like put it for discussion. Yeah.
or at least if you're putting yourselves on a pedestal, then you should look good on the pedestal to inspire confidence.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
another thing. Is like public representation and presentation. It's like, are we are the right people talking, or is it just like this crazy guy that we brought in day one and
Yeah.
he's just sticking around? So
Yeah, so yeah, even if some of the discussions like early on was like, oh, yeah, this uh regarding particularly LRMs were like colorful, but then again, no, it's not like that. That's if you want to kind of like, if you want people to trust you, you have to acknowledge your shortcomings. It's like, yes, something you simply cannot consider everything. That's a fact. Like you cannot debate that. And that
It's a big, complicated game, and you
yeah,
guys are doing a make-up shotgun approach to patches.
yeah, and it's like you cannot consider everything. You can try your best, but you can never be perfect. So if you accept that and try to address it, that leads to people trusting you. If you deny it and it's like dismiss um like people that are kind of like pointing out some issue from their perspective, and you dismiss that, you're not going to look like you think you're going to look good, but you're not. So it's kind of like something that's we we try to kind of like be
Yeah,
more professional. Yeah.
yeah, always it's always something to work on.
Yeah. So yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
if because yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I think
That's, sorry,
we
sorry.
said enough on
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we wanted to wrap up. Ian, do you have any last questions you want to ask?
No. Though maybe to repeat for the people who do want to participate, the best way to reach you is obviously taking part of the discussion on a forum and sending you direct messages on Discord, question mark.
Yeah, I mean we have like a Discord channel in Mechwarrior 5 and Mechwarrior Online, like official Discord. We have a channel there, and there's like MW Comp Discord. There's an official channel there. On forums, I think is something that people like. We're already like engaged in there, and also on the forums, like every time that there is like a link to the Cauldron, that there's the link to the Discords, and people can come in and like state their like feedback, like put it out there, and in those Discords they can see us, and even if they want, they can like directly message us through there. Or if all else kind of like fails, it's like just reach out to some of these. I would say we need to put out some of the people that are kind of like in the Cauldron and have like far reach into the community, make them known, so that the purpose that we're envisioning for that, for those people being in the Cauldron, is fulfilled. So they can be contacted, they can be used as a form of like communication. um
I do kind of like the
mhm.
Where's Waldo approach right now, where if people are in the forums discussing a thing, often they have to sort of announce, oh, by the way, I'm not in the Cauldron. I'm just going to try and talk slightly authoritatively on this subject. And it's just like,
Oh,
who's in the Cauldron, who's not, who knows? People have to keep announcing whether they are or aren't, because it's mystery.
Yeah, we'll release an official list sooner or later. It'll happen.
yeah, I think I don't know, like if people that are in the Cauldron, like basically like we have told everyone in the Cauldron that, hey, if you're engaging in any sort of discussion on the forums or on any sort of channel, be respectful, don't dismiss stuff, and you don't even need to kind of like announce that you're part of the Cauldron, because I don't know, like just get involved in the discussion. That has like a little bit less filter on that front. But again, I would say that it is a valid point that having a known set of like people would help with kind of like relaying some of that feedback like in a more efficient. Uh,
All right. Yep. Those are the places you can contact the
Yep.
members of the Cauldron. Possibly. Who knows? I'm a member now. No, I'm not.
I mean, you have a direct line of communication, so it's kind of like
Because one more
yeah.
place you could go is like streamer discords, like Ashcord and Beefcord. I'm in there, and so is Navid, and I'm just waiting for a ping. It's like, is anyone there? Is anyone gonna send me anything?
All right. And I
All
guess
over the place.
if everything fails, message Byter directly. And
I'm just some random guy in the first circuit. Or am I?
I mean,
God damn it. I'm
I
not
mean,
in the Cauldron.
he has a direct line of communication. So yeah, ping Biter.
Yeah, bug this
Uh,
guy.
That's
Seems
such
adamant about it.
It's a game of Chinese whispers where you ping Bytus and then I just direct message Navid and Kranz. That's just no, that's silly.
all right, let's take that opportunity though to wrap up since we are over time already. Yeah, thank you guys for being here and representing the First Circuit. Thank you, not the First Circuit, the Cauldron.
Nope.
God damn it, too many names. Thank you for giving us a bit more of an insight into the workings of the Cauldron. It was definitely eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot of things about you guys, and I'm happy we had this conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed your time here as well. And if you have any last words, now's the time.
All right, those are their last
All right,
words. I've been
last words.
Byter.
Yep. Thank you guys again for being here. Today was episode number 146 of the First Circuit podcast, talking about the Cauldron, formerly known as the Gulag. Your hosts today, Byter,
Clark.
myself, Ian. Bye-bye. And, of course, our beautiful guests with that beautiful camera, BearClaw.
Yeah, I know, right? It's great. Get comments about it all the time.
It is a great hairstyle. And Navid A1.
Okay. Yep. Happy to be here, guys. So it was a great chat.
Yep.
It's good fun.
And see you guys in the next episode of the First Circuit podcast.